last part, really, we're going to mention a couple things about COVID after that, but we'll jump into, I went to watch a session, which is a topic really close to our hearts at our organization, and it was on undifferentiated connective tissue disease. And I want to preface this by saying the term undifferentiated connective tissue disease in itself has sort of evolved depending on where you are in the world, or different doctors have said that I think it's being in the latest coding, it may have even fallen off. So I just want to mention that the term is an umbrella term, but I don't think it's quite as umbrella as at one point it was. If on our website under arthritis.org/diseases, we started journaling the different, we just call it undifferentiated disease, because people will say, well, I have undifferentiated connective tissue disease, or then there's undifferentiated spondyloarthritis, arthropathy, unclassified seronegative spondyloarthritis, undifferentiated inflammatory polyarthritis, undifferentiated autoimmune inflammatory disease. Like, we have so many of these that we've collected, and the unifying factor there is you have an early presentation of something that falls in this category, and it has not quite evolved or developed to a point, whether that's symptom wise or blood level wise, laboratory wise, that meets a criteria to diagnose you as whatever that is. So different doctors will call it different things. The other thing that I want to mention, and this wasn't part of the session, this is just general knowledge and what we do as an organization, undifferentiated connective tissue disease, if we just think of the umbrella term anyway, but we'll use that right now, is that not all patients even know if they were actually diagnosed with that first. I only know I was because even back then I was kind of like aggressive, I guess, on wanting answers.
My records.
And I was, because they kept saying, well, we need to wait and watch for you to get worse. You have to watch. Well, I'm going to watch you get worse. I'm going to watch you get worse. And they wouldn't give me any treatments. And I did. I kept getting worse. And I was like, is there something I can call this? Because I was getting so frustrated. My parents are asking, people are asking, what's wrong with you? I mean, it was clearly clear I was going downhill fast. And she said undifferentiated connective tissue disease. So that's all I had to go for. But she would have never told me that.
Unless you asked.
Unless I pressed it. And I wanted to make that really clear, because we did a study in 2013 to 14 was the first research study we ever did at our organization. And we wanted to test the hypothesis that what was perceived at 15% of people originally diagnosed with undifferentiated connective tissue disease actually move forward to a full-blown diagnosis. That's what research was saying, 15%. And talking to other patients, we were like, it's got to be higher. That just doesn't make sense. How can it only be 15%? There's so many of us that don't have answers, that wait, and don't even know that that's what they have, whether the doctor officially diagnosed it or just never
Didn't tell them.
Told them. Like, there was all these questions. So it was a secondary thing that we were testing in this research, these early symptom study of 6 diseases. But we were curious when we asked in the questionnaire the earliest symptoms they could remember. It was a retrospective study, which means you're going back and there is a bias of memory and etc. But in that first 6 to 12 months, what people were reporting, and what was so amazing is it sort of proved our theory, because it said what was showing is literally 15%. I think it was like 14.9 people who were diagnosed and knew they were diagnosed went on to develop these diseases. But then when you look at what people reported on their symptoms, and then you've got this lag of diagnosis, and they marked that they were just told they didn't know what was wrong with them, it was 54%.
I remember that.
And
yeah.
And so that was a huge aha moment. So this has become a very big focus for our organization, this early diagnosis, early detection. What is it called? Do you even know that you have an official diagnosis? And is it undifferentiated connective tissue disease, or does it fall under one of these other sort of undifferentiated early pre-diagnosis diagnosis? Okay, in saying that, let me tell you what I learned. So I knew a lot of this, actually, just because of the work we do at our organization. But how I'm going to summarize it for you is essentially the people who were presenting were doing, they started doing a literature review. And what that means is when you're doing research, you're starting a research project, the early phases is to go back and look through journals. You go and you find everything that's been done in this arena, and then it becomes like an index of publications, so that you can see what's been done, how can I build on it, and essentially, has my theory been proven, that type of thing. So the title of this session was well, I didn't want to go to the second one I'll make a comment on, but that it was basically diagnosis and treatment. So they were looking on specifically for diagnostic criteria and symptom complexity. That's the one that I focused on. So there's no real definition.
Even now.
And it's just, how can you have a diagnosis of something that has no definition, first of all? And there's different definitions. So they're basically pulling up a lot of citations, a lot of, it's called here, or these are the symptoms that are listed in this, in this criteria. And then it's just amazing that even today, and one of the things we were so fascinated with as an organization, there was this group, it just always says Mosca et al. So the last name of whomever the lead researcher is Mosca. I've got to find this person because I've been quoting them almost a decade. And here we go. They start showing that research again for Mosca. And I was like, Mosca.
I know that. Yeah.
I know that name. And so they were showing all of this research that they had published on wanting to do classification criteria, just like you would for RA, right? You have a classification criteria and it's updated every few years. And if you meet them, then that's what you have. And they can't even, people, and when I say they, globally, there's no mutual agreement on what that classification is. Okay, so if we're trying to focus on early detection and early diagnosis, at least we have to figure out, in my opinion, what the pre-clinical is. We're already jumping into prevention and all this other stuff. So
for undifferentiated, which again, they have a no classification, but they're trying to jump into treatment and whatnot for it.
So yes, so formal diagnostic classification criteria does not exist, and even patients are unclear of what it means by the right name. And so they did reference the European Reference Network in 2019 was also looking to find out more about the classifications and diagnostic. And a lot of the things in this literature review, I kept highlighting 2009. 1999. I mean, I'm looking at these slides and I'm saying, man, old. 1998, 2008.
How old is that? Yeah.
And I'm sitting here and I'm saying to myself, okay, if that is if the data we're looking at, how many times has the diagnostic criteria changed for RA? So you're saying in 2008 that only 12% or 20% or 15% or whatever patients that had undifferentiated diagnosis or connective tissue disease progressed to lupus or RA or what have you. That's gotta be higher, because the
Gotta think.
criteria for diagnosis is now easier, right? You can go where it was very hard to diagnose it for RA, and then when it changed in 2010 and then again later, it became easier. So that's what my brain was like exploding inside my head, because that's all I kept thinking was, the numbers make no sense. But then they happily surprised me, because then they started talking about, again, Mosca came up, which kind of made me laugh. So they had they were taking a 2014 criteria for rheumatoid arthritis, systemic sclerosis, which also used to be called scleroderma, but the newer term is systemic sclerosis, and lupus RA. I don't know which one I already said first, but they took the more recent criteria, and then across the board, you looked at the older data that they had generated, and then they realized if you would have taken those symptoms from those people, sort of like what we did in our study, that it was like 16% were additionally reclassified, 20% were originally, so it was like that percentage was now going up, because it was no longer 15, it was 35, or it was 40, or it was whatever, because all of those people that initially you're talking undifferentiated. Why is this important? Well, historically, and this happened to me when I was undifferentiated. They said, I can't treat you. There is no treatment plan for undifferentiated. We have to wait and wait for you to get worse, so you get a diagnosis and we can treat you. So I fell in that loophole. Sort of the loophole we were talking about in the earlier debrief segment on the early RA, or the prevention of RA. It's like, where does that wall come into play with our access to care, and where we're able to treat? But they used the example, that a question saying, okay, great, I have this. Is there anything to stop the progression? And there. It's really, we're up to this challenging moment even today, where we don't know what we can give you.
So that's
and it's just this couldn't have come, in my opinion, again, at a better time to reintroduce this issue. Because if we're trying to do prevention studies, we're trying to treat earlier, we're talking about precision medicine, you gotta figure out what the heck undifferentiated connective tissue, or any of the precursor leading up to a diagnosis. You've got to figure that out. We have got to come together as a community, or the researchers, whoever needs to just agree, and we have to get something there where we can build on.
Because again, it takes all of the early diagnosis to better treatment to cause less destruction. And that's not happening, because they're waiting for all of the next steps. Now, Tiffany, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't AI arthritis also bring something to the forward data bank that
we have? Yes, you were at that meeting. You knew.
Yes.
You're like, correct me if I'm wrong. You were sitting at the table.
Right. I'm just making sure.
Nice tee up.
Yeah, I was trying to tee it up a little bit. Yeah,
that was clever. Sorry that I called you out on that, but
I was sitting at the table.
So yes, Forward Data Bank, formerly known as Forward National Data Bank for Rheumatic Diseases, they have built and are housing our own AI arthritis data bank within their system, within their servers, and that came about based on a project that we had done, a community team, an award-winning project that really catapulted us into this whole precision medicine genre back in 2015. And we created an online project platform, and that we could house all of our projects. We could do focus groups, we could do a lot of breakout situations, and we needed a data bank. We needed somewhere to house the research, the information that we were doing. And we went to a meeting with them, and initially they were just going to help us with that one project. But then we started talking about all of the possibilities, and in particular, undifferentiated disease. So
in their mouths, their jaw drop.
I said to them, okay, here's the situation. We're getting all of these patients to sign up for this broader arthritis voices program, which we'll be happy to link to on this YouTube. Essentially, it's not just patients, it's any of you, any stakeholder that's watching this, sign up. We will connect you with opportunities to be at the table to solve problems with us. And one of those problems was, I said, hey, we're getting all these people to sign up for this arthritis voices program, and the projects that will go into this online platform. Doesn't it make sense to also capture the people who are not yet diagnosed, that have this undifferentiated? Because if we do, we would be the first ones in history, to my knowledge, to actually capture them in their actual diagnosis.
And you told the story.
And they were like,
yeah. And you told the story of the 15%, but then what we captured, which was what you did. And they were blown away and like, holy smokes.
So that is something that, as we build out this program and we start having people sign up, it's not just people who are already diagnosed, it's people who think that they may have our diseases that we're also looking to capture because of this reason. And maybe the data we collect could help these researchers, to help clinicians, to help us all come together and in some way keep this down.
Right, exactly.
So that we have a strong baseline to build on in a realistic numbers. It was, I skipped this part. Well, they did a really good job of taking like, this is a patient, they're here, this is what we're telling them, we diagnosed them with, then they have the next question, the treatment. So I liked how they created a story. What I didn't like was the original story, and I couldn't post anything in the chat because we have, we're being professional and it's not my place. But in my head, another like aneurysm I'm having. They gave this the scenario when this patient first had symptoms and went to a doctor who recommended she go to a rheumatologist because she had an elevated ANA level and Raynaud's and some hair loss and some joint pain and a couple other things. And the rheumatologist ran the labs and said, well, I can't see any swelling or anything in like a physical examination, and the ANA is not high enough titer to be lupus. So clear, it said like, so clearly your high level of anxiety is causing this, and maybe you should seek therapy. What? I can't say, they did not tell us what year this was. I mean, this could have been, who knows? I hope it was 10 years ago. Although we didn't hear this.
Yeah, I was thinking 1990.
But we do unfortunately still hear patients say this today, that they are told that. So if you are a rheumatologist and you are listening, do not ever say that to a patient. So there's nothing worse.
Yeah, when they're symptomatic, go back and have labs right then. Because
and you know what? Maybe if there was such a thing where they could classify undifferentiated or whatever we want to call it, maybe, then it could. They didn't say, but it seemed like in the session where the patient did end up getting diagnosed with undifferentiated connective tissue, but it clearly wasn't from the rheumatologist, which led me to believe, even though they did not clarify, that it was the primary care physician that did the diagnosis, which is wrong in itself.
Absolutely.
So I forgot, I wanted to mention that. Yeah. So anyway, that was very intriguing. There was a second part. It was about the psychosocial challenges, but I have to admit it was not novel to me, in the sense that everything that they were capturing was the same thing we all go through. Who am I now? I'm too young. What's this going to do to my social life? So I looked at it and just went, well, that's not novel to undifferentiated. That's we all go through that. So kudos. I just didn't. The only thing I can say is it's the same. It was pretty much the same thing. One thing I will add to this, they did just talk about some research too that was done with undifferentiated disease. And I'm going to go back and see if there was anything else to pull. But, well, actually 2 points. This I found fascinating. When they were talking about the patient and questions they would ask, they talked about, first of all, is there anything to help stop the progression? I know I've got this now. If undifferentiated stays at undifferentiated, then it typically will never get to that super aggressive disease, which is a good thing. So, side note, if you have undifferentiated connective tissue disease, it could be a blessing. You know, I know it's frustrating to say I don't know what I have, but if people would recognize that as a diagnosis, then you do have something, and it's a good thing because the possibility that you could get into a worser situation is lower. So that's good. In saying that, they did say that they talked a little bit about those sort of pre-treatments again. They talked about RA, that there's some that's happening in trying to treat incomplete lupus by revisiting hydroxychloroquine and pre-treating early. So it's that same pre-treatment. Some of the earlier studies did show when they've tried these before, same thing happened. The patients did end up getting the diseases, but it just didn't have, it just was prolonged because they were on the treatment. So just knowing that that's out there. And then this fact, study the theoretic patient, again, I don't know if it was a real person or not, was wanting to start a family with, and was worried about, well, first of all, progression, and second of all, treatment. And they presented a study that showed pregnant women that are diagnosed with undifferentiated connective tissue disease were more likely 20%, 20.4% to 4.5% of healthy subjects were more likely to progress to definite disease than non-pregnant.
Oh, wow.
So there was something, I'm sorry, not healthy, non-pregnant UC. So people who were not pregnant and had undifferentiated connective tissue disease and had 4.6% chance of progressing, but the pregnant women had 20%, 20.4% chance of progressing to full-on disease. How many stories have we heard of women who have said, I had my first flare after I gave birth?
How many?
Yep.
Or I can't even tell you. It's so, I have heard that I had onset after childbirth. And I always thought of it as the severe physical trauma, because we do know that's an environmental contributor. But now I'm kind of like, could they have had early undifferentiated? They had maybe had some arthritis, maybe they had some fatigue, maybe they had some of these other symptoms that went, go get the therapist, when in reality
they could have been doing something about it.
Mixture, the hormones, the physical. So that just leaves us with a food for thought, I guess.
Yeah.
So it was good. I was really glad I went to that one.
Good.
I really enjoyed that one.